think I've always been a storyteller. From probably the time I was 5 years old, I crafted little dramas in this very living room with my brother for my parents' friends. Whenever they had a party, there'd always have to be a 5-minute pause in which we'd come down the steps and my brother and I would perform plays. One of the wonderful things about performing for your mother and for your father is that you get unconditional love and you become addicted to that very early applause. That's what drives you, and I think that, you talk about all the disappointments that you face in life, and I think that early validation and that early applause is what drove me forward. I can still hear it. I can still see their smiles when I sort of uttered words. I'm Lynn Nottage, I'm a playwright. I grew up in a neighborhood called Boerum Hill on a block that was incredibly multicultural. It really was sort of this melting pot of people, and I really think that that informs how I write. My yard, in fact, was the epicenter of the block, where all of the kids came to play, and it was just filled with liveliness and with stories, and I really think that impacted how I see the world, is that the world was always a world of inclusion. It was always a world that had many different stories and point of views, because that was what my yard was. As an African-American woman playwright, it's been an uphill battle. To get access to the stage has been very difficult, and there still remains a glass ceiling. The reality is I've won this wonderful prize for the second time, the Pulitzer Prize, but I have to face the fact that there are only 2 women on Broadway in this entire season who are represented playwrights. And in 2017, why is that still the case? Why are we still sort of beating up against that glass ceiling trying to crack it? These kind of validations, I think, help younger women. They look at the fact that some of us have been on that treadmill for so long. And for me, it's been like 25 years of writing plays, 25 years of rejections and disappointments, 25 years of trying to figure out how do I get my voice out there in a way that's interesting, that reaches as large an audience as possible. And I think that the work that I've done will allow younger women to think more expansively about what they can accomplish in theater. Well, as a storyteller, I find evolution to be interesting. And I think that the new Brooklyn, while it challenges me in many ways, there are things that I love. I love the fact that I can go to my corner store and get yogurt in like 50 different varieties. I miss the multiculturalism of my block. I miss the textures. This was a block that had a lot of economic diversity. We don't see quite as much of that. And I think that economic diversity really brings people together in ways that when you have these divides, we become more ghettoized. And so strangely, it's like I feel like we're returning to a Brooklyn of 50 years ago, not the Brooklyn of 20, 30 years ago. It's always an interesting process when you're trying to find a new play. I had received this enormous commission from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival to write plays about American revolutions. And I thought, wow, how am I going to approach this? I received an email from a very close friend of mine. She was struggling as a single mother of 2 and didn't know quite what to do. What she was really asking is that for us to have compassion and understanding. And I said to her, why don't we go to Occupy Wall Street, which was beginning that day. So we really didn't know what that movement was going to be, but we ended up being in a community with lots of other people who obviously felt very disaffected and angry. Economic stagnation is really sort of shifting our American narrative. And why is this happening? Why suddenly are people who've been solidly middle class, people who've really basically invested in the American dream, struggling? We went to Reading, Pennsylvania, in part because it was, at that time, the poorest city of its size in America. It was a majority minorities. It was a city that for generations had invited immigrants from German to Italian to African Americans who came to the Great Migration, and now a multitude of Latinos from Dominican to Puerto Rican to Mexican. And so it really is representative of sort of the movements of America, but has become stagnant because of the economy. It was a city that had steel factories. The factory said, don't strike, we're going to lock you out. And so they went from having these solid jobs to suddenly finding themselves without a safety net. We suddenly were all sitting in the same circle for the for the first time. I said, your experience sounds very much like the African American experience in America. That's what motivated me to write the play. And what I always do is replace judgment with curiosity. But I thought, let me listen and let me lead with my empathy. And I think that that's why Sweat is the play that it is that it's truthful and it's complicated, because you have to enter into that complication. You know, I think this is such a beautiful moment for African women who are telling stories. I think for the first time, we've been able to sort of penetrate the marketplace. You know, you look at television and shows like Queen Sugar and Greenleaf. It's like suddenly you have women who are complex and who are assertive and who are in positions of power on television. For young women of color, I think now is the moment to sort of spread your wings and make art, because there is space, and there is going to continue to be space. And like winning the Pulitzer Prize, I think what it's saying to the world is that there's value in our stories, and people are finally sitting up and taking notice.